Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about historical Highland dress, and in particular the belted plaid and the Dress Act of 1746. This is not the video that I was meant to post this week. The waistcoat video is coming soon, but I still have a little bit of work left to do finishing everything up, so I thought I might do a more straightforward history type video in the meantime. I will be working on my waistcoat while I talk, so there will be some sewing clips in between. I haven't had a crack at making this kind of content yet though, so please bear with me. Highland dress has long been a source of fascination outside of Scotland, but it is also badly misunderstood and heavily romanticized. Long before the plaid or anything resembling a kilt was worn, men's dress consisted of trews, similar to medieval hose, as well as saffron shirts or tunics and cloaks. The belted plaid, which is the ancestor of the modern kilt, appears much later. It's easy to imagine the kilt as a much older garment than it really is, and the movie Brave really hasn't helped that image. Same goes for Braveheart. By the end of the 16th century, we do find references to the plaid in its kilt-like form, namely a length of fabric 4 yards or longer, laid out in pleats, wrapped around the waist, and belted. I should make it clear that when we use the word plaid in a historical context, we're referring to a specific garment, not a pattern. Plaid is the garment, tartan is the pattern. It's a Frankenstein's the name of the doctor type of thing. The earliest known description was published in the Life of Red Hugh O'Donnell in 1594, with a description of Hebridean troops whose exterior dress was mottled cloaks of many colors, with a fringe to their shins and calves, belted around the loins. The earliest visual depiction we have of the belted plaid is a German woodcut from 1631. The poet John Taylor travelled to Braemar in 1618 and later published the following description of Highland dress.
Their habit is shoes with but one sole apiece, stockings, which they call short hose, made of a warm stuff of diverse colours they call tartan. As for breeches, many of them, nor their forefathers, never wore any, but a jerkin of the same stuff that their hoses of, their garters being bands of wreaths of hay or straw, with a plaid about their shoulders, which is a mantle of diverse colours, much finer and lighter stuff than their hose, with blue caps on their heads, a handkerchief knit with 2 knots about their neck, and thus they are attired.
Here we see the basic elements of Highland dress that would remain consistent up until the 18th century and the Dress Act. Essentially, Highland dress in the 17th and 18th centuries would have included a plaid, pleated and belted around the waist, hose, a jacket, possibly a waistcoat, a bonnet, and a neckcloth. Taylor's reference to shoes with only one sole may describe simple leather brogues. These garments would have been worn by Highland soldiers under Bonnie Prince Charlie during the Jacobite uprisings in 1745 and, yes, for the Outlander fans who make up a solid chunk of my demographic, by Jamie Fraser. The plaid is an extremely useful garment. Because the pleats aren't sewn down when you remove the belt, it collapses out into a massive blanket, and we have accounts of Highlanders sleeping in the plaid. The upper part of the plaid also functions as a cloak, and it provides surprisingly good protection from the elements. I've worn mine on some long walks in the snow, and it's proven surprisingly warm and comfortable in low temperatures. I have also had a lot of success using my plaid as terrier bait. It'll be a sad, sad day for Tabby when I take it back to Scotland with me. Duncan Forbes gave the following description of the belted plaid in a letter to the Lord Lion in 1746.
The garb is certainly very loose, and fits men inured to it to go through great fatigues, to make very quick marches, to bear out against the inclemency of the weather, to wade through rivers, and shelter in huts, woods, and rocks upon occasion, which men dressed in the low country garb could not possibly endure.
Not only does this description speak to the utility of the plaid as a garment, but it also hints at the political and military baggage tied to the kilt by the 18th century. This is tactical. After Bonnie Prince Charlie's revolt got curb-stomped resoundingly by the Duke of Cumberland at the Battle of Culloden in 1746, and our man BPC fled back to France, the Parliament of Great Britain passed the Act of Prescription in an effort to bring the Scottish Highlands under control and to prevent further rebellion. It's worth noting that most of the Act didn't apply to all of Scotland, but rather to a list of specific Highland counties. First and foremost, the Act forbade persons living in these areas to own or bear weapons. The Act also required teachers and schoolmasters to take oaths of loyalty and to lead prayers for the king and his family in schools. Penalties generally consisted of fines, and for repeat offenses, deportation. Of course, there are a ton of myths about the Act of Prescription. Highlanders were not forbidden to speak Gaelic or stripped of their clan names. The Act didn't include capital punishment, and nobody was getting hanged for wearing trews. But the section of the Act of Prescription most relevant to this video is known as the Dress Act. As we've said, the plaid had military and political connotations and was associated with the Jacobite cause. In an attempt to assimilate the Highlands, the Dress Act placed the following restrictions on men's clothing.
From and after the 1st day of August 1747, no man or boy within that part of Great Britain called Scotland, other than shall be employed as officers and soldiers in his Majesty's forces, shall on any pretence whatsoever wear or put on the clothes commonly called Highland clothes, that is to say, the plaid, philibeg or little kilt, trowse, shoulder belts, or any part whatsoever of what peculiarly belongs to the Highland garb, and that no tartan or party-coloured plaid or stuff shall be used for greatcoats or for upper coats.
In other words, it was illegal for men or boys to wear the philibeg or philibeg, a short tailored kilt that looks a lot like the modern kilts we wear today, as well as trews or tartan sashes. The faily moor or belted plaid was right out. Men's coats and greatcoats made out of tartan fabric were also banned. The punishment for a first offence was 6 months in prison, and any further offences meant deportation to one of the king's plantations for 7 years. It's interesting to note that Highland dress and tartan were still permitted in the military. Women were also unaffected by the ban, and ladies such as Flora MacDonald continued to wear tartan dresses and wraps. The Dress Act was repealed in 1782, by which time the damage was already done. The belted plaid had gone out of fashion and was no longer widely worn in the Highlands. Prior to the Dress Act, clan tartans weren't a thing. There are some sources which claim that weavers in certain areas grew accustomed to certain patterns, leading to distinct regional tartans. However, tartans were heavily dictated by social status and wealth. Fabric in the 18th century was expensive, and certain colors were more difficult and costly to dye. Therefore, certain reds and blues served as status symbols, while yellows, greens, and browns were relatively easy and inexpensive to dye. My plaid is a decent example of a very lower-class tartan made up of yellows and greens. Clan tartans really took off after George IV's visit to Scotland in 1822, which was met with great pageantry and celebration. George himself appeared in a Royal Stuart tartan kilt and hose, with some sort of flesh-colored hose underneath. Lady Hamilton remarked that since the prince is to be here for so short a time, the more we see of him, the better, which D.B. Horne took as a comment on the length of his kilt. Nowadays, the belted plaid is very much a thing of the past. The short kilt, or philibeg, is however still a part of modern formal dress, and even companies like Coca-Cola and Iron Brew have their own tartans. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you'd like to see more history videos like this one in the future. I've linked my Instagram and my Ko-Fi in the description in case you'd like to check those out and help support this channel. Please also like, comment, and subscribe. Or dislike if you're some kind of Hanoverian who wears breeches. I'd also like to thank Tabitha and my dad for their contributions to this video. Until next time, stay safe and see you soon.